the stream has begun. But not the
And
episode,
the stream has begun. All right.
There'll be more to these in the future.
Okay.
There's the first couple ones, so don't you wait. Don't
Don't you wait.
Hello.
I'm really excited for this part.
I'm excited too.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Hard to Say Goodbye bonus content. We have a special guest. We've now finished the first 4 episodes, and now we're taking a look back. And this is Trisha. We're relying on you a little bit here, but we want
almost entirely.
We want to compare the big moments from the show to the big moments in the books, or details that you think just drastic. I mean, that you feel that are important.
Can I just tell you how excited I am that this is the bonus content? Because I feel like for the first couple seasons of the show, especially, people who read the books, where everyone was like, shut up, I don't want to hear about the books, you dumb book people. Shut your mouth, book people. It's all about the series. And so now I'm being like, hey, let's talk about how the books and the series are different. I'm like, oh my God, they're finally letting me talk about it. But also, I think the Shut Your Mouth book people came from a lot of people. That's my son, by the way.
Shut up. Big Game of Thrones fan too.
Yeah.
He read the books before you did.
He did. It's shocking.
He can't read, and I wouldn't let him read that anyway. Oh, there he goes.
I can't read either.
He's quick.
He just keeps running across the set. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the "Hey, book people, please shut your mouths" came from the fear that the book people always be like, well, the books are superior, and it'll ruin some of the enjoyment of the series. But I think now at this point, looking back on it, that's certainly not the case. Yeah. The series does some things much better than the books, and there are some moments that the books do much better than the series. And I think discussing the differences in them is really fascinating to me to help us all figure out, both book readers and series watchers alike, how this whole monster is going to end. Because sometimes you piece something together that was only in the books with something that was only in the series and come up with a theory out of that. And it's just fascinating to me. So I like to nerd out about this. So thank you, guys.
And I started getting more interested in what was going on with the books once the series, because I avoided the books because I didn't want to know what was going to happen. Because originally... the show hewed very closely to the books, so if you knew
in the beginning,
if you knew what was happening in the books, you knew what was happening. So it's like I tried to avoid it for those reasons. And once the show had surpassed the books, I went back and I started looking more at that stuff. And so I'm interested to have this discussion and know more about that.
Yeah, so let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so starting off with episode 1, if we talk about that scene right in the beginning, that prologue scene with the White Walkers, one of the most interesting changes is in the books, the corpses are not arranged in any pattern.
Oh. Interesting.
Yeah.
They're just strewn about?
In the books, I believe, that they're just, strewn about. And I don't think that they're mauled like that. I think they all look frozen to death, if I remember correctly. But there's definitely no pattern. So I'm like, okay, series, what you trying to tell us there? That's an interesting highlight.
In hindsight, I don't know that they're trying to tell us anything, which feels like a missed opportunity.
I don't know. I don't know. With all the stuff we're getting with Bran right now, I think that's where that symbol ties in.
Because kind of like one of my issues at the end of season 7 is like, I don't know what the White Walk what were they waiting around for? Because they're clearly not waiting to get to the wall, because the opening gives you the impression that they're like right there. You know what I mean?
At least some of them have been. Yeah, it's also interesting. In the books, everyone south of the wall calls them the Others.
Yes, which they didn't do in the show because of Lost.
Oh, is that why?
Yeah,
that's fair.
Okay.
I mean, like if you want to just make yourself distinguished.
I agree. I agree. And of course, that in the books, their White Walkers' appearance is described more like what we see now in the later seasons, where they're all white with the glowing blue eyes, whereas in the series at this point, we're seeing them almost look like gray, dead corpses.
Yeah, zombies.
So that's interesting. One of the biggest differences that I see right off the bat in this episode, when we start being introduced to the Starks and the Lannisters, there's reference made in this first episode that we are currently 17 years after the rebellion. In the books, we are only 14 years after the rebellion.
Which, as a person who doesn't read the books, I'd be like, oh, whatever. It's like, it doesn't sound that important.
Except for it makes a huge difference in the ages of all the children.
Yes.
So if you think of it, the easiest one to make that comparison with is Daenerys.
Yeah.
Because Daenerys and Viserys were exiled during the rebellion.
Yeah.
Which means that in the series, Daenerys is around 16.
Yeah.
In the books, Daenerys is 13 going on 14.
When
she's going through all the events, being married to the Khal.
Yeah. So if you're like, why did they up the ages? That would be why.
That would be why.
That would be why.
So it makes roughly everyone 3 years older. So if you think about the fact that in the series, Robb and Jon, we see them as approximately 17-year-olds. They're coming into their own.
Yeah.
They're about 14 in the books.
Yeah, which also helps, I think, explain some of Robb's decision-making in what I understand of the season 2. You think about in the books, he's basically just a horny teenager.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially when you think of Sansa.
Yeah.
I guess in the TV series, she's supposed to be around 13.
Yeah.
In the books, she's around 10, 11.
No.
So being a princess, it makes more sense.
It makes a little bit more sense.
And Arya, what, is an infant?
Arya is supposed to be 9 in the books. She's about 11 in the series. Rickon is only 3 in the books. He's about 6 in the series. Bran, when he's pushed out the window in the series, is about 10. In the books, he's about 7. When that happens, it makes to me, it makes everything a lot more grave, a lot more real, and a lot more dark.
Jamie kicked a kid out the window at 7 years old.
Yeah.
So he's a good guy.
He's a good dude.
Well, I mean, not a good guy if you kick him out the window at 10 either, for clarity.
I mean, you understand.
Well, and it's also interesting, something that I looked into, because there's a flashback in season 6 of young Ned, which is where we start finally getting to some clues about, like, concrete clues about Jon, right? And so I'm like, how the fuck? Because that was 17 years ago, and that kid's a kid. And then we've got Sean Bean 17 years later. Like, that's some Obi-Wan shit right there, like aging. And so I looked into it, like, and it makes sense because of the time, but, like, especially in the book, he's supposed to be younger, but in the show, like, Ned's supposed to be, like, pushing 50.
Yeah.
And Sean Bean's like 70.
He's not 70.
He is not. If you said he was 50, if you said he was 42, I'd be like, oh yeah, okay. Sorry, I have a very bad way of gauging.
I do too, but I definitely can believe he's like 50. Another one where it really makes a difference, Joffrey is about 16 in the series. He's only about 12 in the books.
What a nightmare.
So if you think about him freaking out like that for stupid stuff, it makes a lot more sense when you think of a 12-year-old's reaction.
100%.
And Myrcella, to finish the rest of it, Myrcella and Tommen are about 11 and 10 respectively in the series. They're about 8 and 7 in the books.
Jeez.
So yeah, to me that really changes a lot and changes a lot of their motivations moving forward in future seasons as well. I understand why they age them up because some horrible things happen to them, and they probably didn't want to be the show that went there as far as, like, kid rape and making it kind of seem okay between Daenerys and Khal, and you know, all that kind of stuff that happens with it. So I get it, but George R.R. Martin does some horrible things to children.
Okay, so here's what I found. So Sean Bean is almost 60. He's 59.
Okay.
Apparently he's supposed to be 37 in Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah.
Which makes sense when you say 17-year time gap, and you look at the young kid they got.
20
and it's like, sure,
during the rebellion.
If you want to say, like, them's hard years up in the north, you know what I mean?
Well, they are.
Yeah.
That's also tough because he was just 50 when this show started.
Yeah.
Too. Maybe they started shooting when he was like 49.
So he's supposed to be a full decade younger. But again, it's supposed to be a hard time. It's fine. It's just when they showed that young kid in that flashback, I'm like, hold on a second. How old is Ned supposed to be?
All right.
If the cold can do that to you.
It will. The Northerners are hard. They're hard people.
So how do you feel about the age change?
I mean, part of me really appreciates how dark things are in the book because that's part of what drew me in the first place, being that I read the books first. So, of course, that's probably what I'll always initially picture. Yeah. But I completely understand it from a Hollywood point of view of wanting to cast older actors, not wanting to have to depict a child being sold as a wife and, you know, like not wanting to have to deal or some of the stuff that happens to Sansa very soon. Yeah. Like there's a lot of that when you think they were super young is real horrible.
And also from a production standpoint, the rules for filming with underage people are different and more challenging and all that stuff. So I think from every aspect, it makes sense.
I get it. It's harder to justify the actions, though.
Yeah, like just thinking about like what some of those people choose to do, children choose to do. It's like, yeah, it's a little bit easier knowing that they're slightly older.
Yeah, and I think it's also an interesting, going to the book's depiction. I mean, that's, if you're trying to do something, a fantasy story that hews closer towards the reality of the medieval ages, it's like, yeah, you were expected to do adult shit when you were 12.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Like, that's what we expected of you, because you're not going to be around much longer.
That's part of that world.
Look at Ned at 37, for crying out loud.
I mean, if that means that Ned and Robert overthrew the king at 20.
Yeah.
And Robert looks like that now.
Yeah, that's what happened.
He's lived a lot of life.
I'm not judging his. Well, I can judge his lifestyle. He's an awful person, but it's just like I get that it is confusing. But speaking about the ages, you also mentioned before we start talking about the Cal and Khaleesi and making it more okay-ish for the viewers more that the viewers are more okay with that relationship, at least age-wise. But still, the final shot of the first episode is not my favorite in the show. I'm not a big fan.
Well, and that is one of I know I mentioned this in our regular show. Yeah. This is one of my top 3 least favorite changes from the book.
So what's the change?
So the change is that the first time that Daenerys and Khal Drogo sleep together, it is consensual. The very first time.
Huh.
And they tried to reenact some of that scene, but I think taking that away from her, I think that sucked. Mm-hmm. And Emilia Clarke came forward and said, that change was to get people to empathize with my character, and, that there were reasons why they did it in the series. I didn't like it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like that they kept doing it, that they kept showing us rapey scenes with those two. Because to me, then her motivation later, when she does all those things to save him, and she goes into the fire with the eggs, those are not nearly as powerful as if you believe this is someone who she truly loved and truly was an equal and ruled with. Granted, season 1, she gets there in the series, but it's not the same.
But can you clarify to me in what way is consensual?
Okay, so here, I actually...
She's 12, right?
I have some of this. Yes, Daenerys at this time is 13.
Okay.
And so take us to that scene in the series where she's crying.
Yeah.
And he's coming over to her to undress her.
Yeah.
Let's start there. Their wedding night.
We get a little bit of a language lesson there.
Right, and it's the same in the book.
Okay.
So Khal Drogo stared at her tears, his face strangely empty of expression. No, he said. He lifted his hand and rubbed away the tears roughly with a calloused thumb. And she says, "You speak the common tongue," Dany said in wonder. No, he said again. Perhaps he only had that word, she thought. But it was one word more than she had known he had, and somehow it made her feel a little better. Drogo touched her hair lightly, sliding the silver blonde strands between his fingers and murmuring softly into Dothraki. Dany did not understand the words, yet there was warmth in the tone, a tenderness she had never expected from this man. He put his finger under her chin and lifted her head so she was looking up into his eyes. Drogo towered over her as he towered over everyone. Taking her lightly under the arms, he lifted her and seated her on a rounded rock beside the stream. Then he sat on the ground facing her, legs crossed beneath him, their faces finally at a height. No, he said. Is that the only word you know? She asked him. Drogo did not reply. His long, heavy braid was coiled in the dirt beside him. He pulled it over his right shoulder and began to remove the bells from his hair one by one. After a moment, Dany leaned forward to help. When they were done, Drogo gestured. She understood. Slowly, carefully, she began to undo his braid. It took a long time. All the while, he sat there silently watching her. When she was done, he shook his head, and his hair spread out behind him like a river of darkness, oiled and gleaming. She had never seen hair so long, so black, so thick. Then it was his turn. He began to undress her. His fingers were deft and strangely tender. He removed her silks one by one, carefully, while Dany sat unmoving, silent, looking at his eyes. When he bared her small breasts, she could not help herself. She averted her eyes and covered herself with her hands. No, Drogo said. He pulled her hands away from her breasts, gently but firmly, then lifted her face again to make her look at him. No, he repeated. No, she echoed back. He stood her up then and pulled her close to remove the last of her silks. The night air was chilly on her bare skin. She shivered and goose flesh covered her arms and legs. She was afraid of what would come next, but for a while nothing happened. Khal Drogo sat with his legs crossed, looking at her, drinking in her body with his eyes. After a while, he began to touch her, lightly at first, then harder. She could sense the fierce strength in his hands, but he never hurt her. He held her hand in his own and brushed her fingers one by one. He ran a hand gently down her leg. He stroked her face, tracing the curve of her ears, running a finger gently around her mouth. He put both hands in her hair and combed it with his fingers. He turned her around, massaged her shoulders, slid a knuckle down the path of her spine. So you can see where we're going with this.
Yeah,
like this is
I don't know that I like that
more.
better. I don't know
This
that I
is
like
a
that
much,
better.
but this is a
Why?
much more tender and giving her the time.
Yeah,
And it's also it's more consensual because they're both
no,
choosing
I get
to make
that, but
decisions.
as far as a creative decision, it's like, isn't this dope that this 13-year-old got sold to this guy? He's so cool.
If you want to start poking holes in the ages and the weird sex
No,
stuff
but
in the show,
but what I'm saying is it feels weirdly justification of somebody being sold into marriage, and I'd rather you commit to like, no, this is bad.
Fair enough. I'm going to skip down to the end, where he cupped her face in his huge hands, and she looked into his eyes. No, ? He said, and she knew it was a question. She took his hand and moved it down to the wetness between her thighs. Book sex, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
wetness.
Yes, she whispered as she put his finger inside of her.
And also,
that is the end of that chapter.
I hate picturing George R. R. Martin and him typing those words.
Oh,
yeah. So it's like
he writes a lot of book sex. In these books, guys.
That actually makes me more uncomfortable than the scene we got.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me about that, DJ.
Yeah, because I pictured George R. R. Martin writing, and it's like, yeah, this is so great. This is so cool, and it's not cool. It shouldn't be depicted as cool. This situation's not okay. She's underage. She's sold into marriage. It's like, yeah, that's not okay. Let's. What are the odds that somebody would get sold to a barbarian and that barbarian would be super sweet and cool? You know what I mean?
It's not great, but this is a high fantasy world that we have no legal age in this world, and I don't think that we're trying to convince anyone that in a real world situation being sold to a barbarian king would be okay. So I, rooting for Danny up until this point, was very thankful that he was gentle. It's not what we expected from the Dothraki culture that we've seen so far. It is not what we expect from a warrior who has won every single battle and, as far as we've been led to believe, is this ruthless killer.
Yeah.
So it was like an oh thank God moment for Danny that he was this person. And I think for me reading it, yes, of course she was still sold into this position. So really, was it consensual or was it matter of circumstance is a thing to be discussed. And I agree with you on that, DJ. But to me, it made me realize where the only other male figure in her life up until this point has been her brother, who was super mean to her. To have this person who she's been told is a barbarian and a killer and less than her be so kind in this way, I think was really cool. And I think it completely sets up why she, from the start, wants to be his Khaleesi.
Yeah.
And wants to bear him children. And I think that motivation makes a lot more sense moving through her storyline than, that she was horribly sexually assaulted and then had to overcome that.
And then somehow fell in love with someone.
Well, but also that wouldn't be her perception of it. That's our perception of it from now. You know what I mean? This is a situation like.
Well, it's how it's shown to us.
Well, no, but that's not how she would. She would
perceive
it as sexual assault. She'd perceive it as marriage.
But she doesn't.
It's the only marriage.
Yeah, she does. Do you know she does?
In that scene, she's crying though.
Yeah, she doesn't have to like it. Yeah, I don't. Because it's a bad situation. But to her, that's how these things work.
Yeah, you know I think in both cases it's a bad situation.
Yeah.
But I feel like in one, it's a bad situation where she is given a choice. Yeah. As opposed to a bad situation that you're just in this now. You might as well make the best of it.
It makes more sense of why she would fight more for him. For me as the audience member who's not invested in that or the show that much, I at least appreciate in that. Not the age part, gonna put that out there, but I do appreciate that there is a choice and that he is like the safe side. He's a safe place that she can go to be herself, and he can be something else that she doesn't see out with the rest of the warriors. It's just there's a cooler level to their relationship.
There's more of a connection.
Yeah, because you see their relationship in the show evolve and change, and you see that she fights for him. But at the same time, it's like, do you know anything about Cal? At least there, you know that he means more. In the show, she tames him basically. Kind of
Right.
like, yeah, so at least this shows another side to him.
Yeah, so that's something that when I saw that in the show, I immediately was like, that's not how it happens. Like that was a real big change for me. That was a big deal. Some other smaller changes that do not mean as much. In the books, the Targaryens have purple eyes.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, which they chose not to do. But I do think the Targaryens still look otherworldly
Yeah.
with their like white hair and kind of like oddly grayed out but still dark eyebrows. Like they still look very unusual.
Yeah.
Also, Catelyn, way more of a badass in the books.
Yeah.
She has small moments like when Maester Luwin comes in to deliver the letter about Jon Arryn and she's in bed with Ned. In the books, she's totally naked and just gets up out of bed naked, does not care, does not give AF. And she's just like, "What? He delivered how many of my babies? He's seen it." Like, but it's just it's a layer to Catelyn that we don't get to see. Like, I feel like Catelyn comes off a little frigid in the series. She also she tells Ned to accept being the Hand in the book, where in the series she's begging him not to go again. I feel like she's weaker in the series.
See, but my understanding is they did that because it made a lot of people perceive that as it's her fault that he dies, and so they changed that to make her not look like, because she ends up being right. Don't go, and she's right. Whereas
I guess I never thought of it that way. That's kind of an interesting choice. I always saw it as, she's weak because she's begging him to stay because she doesn't want to lose him. Not that that's weak, but that it's a weaker motivation than saying, he came all the way here. This is your duty. I believe you should do this even at my own expense. Liza's letter that she sends about what she believes happened to Jon, how they have a conversation that, if someone found this in the book, the letter's like in a secret code and in a hidden compartment of a box. And like Liza's a lot smarter about that play in the books, for sure. Okay, so let's move over to episode 2 when Cersei talks about the black-haired boy that she had. In the books, way later, she tells Ned that she aborted the only child she ever would have actually had of Robert's.
Wow.
That she did not let it be born because it was something that would disgust her so much. So that's a huge character change for Cersei from the books to the series.
How do you do that, bad? You guess you drink bad things. You go to Meister Pycelle and you drink stuff.
There's ways. It's not great,
back in the...
Yeah, you get it done. Let's see. Jorah is revealed in the books as an informer to the King's Council way early. You know that right off the bat in the books, and I feel like it's later in this season that we're watching through now that we'll find that out. An interesting thing about Lady's death. So our first direwolf murder. Ned does do it in the books, but he puts up a way bigger fight when they're in the courtroom. And Cersei's saying, well, a wolf needs to die. And Robert in the series just kind of storms out and is like, whatever. In the books, Ned invokes Lyanna's name to try to convince Robert, which is a big play. Robert knows how crappy it was and comes up to Ned and apologizes later for how it all went down. Yeah, lots of different character motivations there, and it means a bit more to everyone than I feel like it's played off in the series.
Yeah. Because mainly by now, halfway through episode 2, Robert just becomes evil, grumpy Santa.
Is there more justification of why everybody's cool that they have wolves as pets? Because in however many rewatch this is, it's like, it is weird that all of a sudden they're like, hey, this giant dangerous animal? Let's just take these puppies in.
It is their house sigil.
Yeah, all right.
It is. And then also, after Lady's death, Ned sends Lady's corpse back north, primarily so that Cersei can't make a fur coat out of it.
Oh,
that makes sense.
Cruella de Vil.
You could probably just bury it.
She'd be a good live-action Cruella de Vil.
Yeah, she would.
Yeah. And then also in the books, when Bran wakes up for the first time, it has nothing to do with one of the direwolves being killed. He has a dream of the three-eyed raven, and that's what wakes him up.
Interesting.
But you did mention that when we talked about episode 2.
Yeah.
I do think it is cooler to see him wake up because of the direwolf.
Or tandem. We don't know that it has any relation. It's just edited together.
What if their genetic code is mixed together and he has wolf powers? We'll figure out later.
I don't know.
Season 3.
Okay, some other fun stuff. Moving on to episode 3 of the series. Jaime, when he talks about killing Mad King Aerys, they make a lot of mentions in the series to him backstabbing him, literally. In the books, he slits his throat.
Interesting. From the back, though?
No,
Okay,
not the back
no.
stuff.
Imagine from the back of his neck all the way around like a can opener.
You go through the back. You're like,
oh, there you go.
Number. That's what I was
Very
thinking.
interesting. Some fun things for your fan art. The hand of the kingpin in the books clasps the cloak at the neck. It's
that makes sense.
On the side.
Do you have George R. Martin, I know the one thing that bummed him out is apparently the throne itself is supposed to be a lot scarier and sketchier. Like, it's supposed to be like a huge tower that's like dangerous to get up on.
Well, it's like Dragonfire melded together a bunch of swords of their enemies.
Because in the show it just looks vaguely uncomfortable. but apparently in the books it's kind of like dangerous to get up on.
I've seen the artist interpretations of it. It's a lot taller too. Yeah. It looks precarious. It looks like it should fall apart.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it should be terrifying. I liked the series did this actually. So I believe the line in the series is the king shits and the hand wipes.
Yes.
In the books, it's the king eats and the hand takes the shit. But I think I like this series fixed to that a little bit better. It's pretty funny. Also, the books never mention that Mad King Aerys said burn them all.
Interesting. Not they don't ever mention it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Not that I can remember. Certainly not at this point. Fascinating, right? So I'm like, series clues. What are we getting here? I feel like we are getting a bunch more clues in the series than we did originally in the books, with the corpses being in a symbol and direwolves leading to Bran's wake up and the burn them all. I mean, maybe we don't know for sure that the burn them all is a thing.
Well, and if nothing else, they at least had, if not necessarily knowing the end, they at least had like 3 or 4 other books before they were making the show, so they kind of at least knew where that was going. Plus whatever George R. R. whispered in their ears.
Famous George whisper. Also, the scene where Viserys gets all up in Daenerys' grill and the other horse riders come through to put him in his place, and then they make him walk. In the books, Daenerys makes him walk.
Ooh, snap.
She makes that call. Yeah, which I kind of would have liked to have seen.
Same.
But maybe that would have been too far since we started her from such a further back place than she starts in the books.
Submissive.
Yeah, really interesting. This is fun. Let's take it over to the wall in Castle Black. There is no, when we see it in the series, we see a gate and a wall that they have to enter to get through to Castle Black from the south. In the books, there's intentionally no gate or wall to the south. Because Castle Black cannot defend itself from anything to the south. They are there to serve the south. They only have defenses to the north.
How do people get inside?
What do you mean?
How do they get from the south?
Just walk through. There's just no.
Open.
Oh, gotcha.
It's just open. There would be no reason for them to keep people out from the south.
I thought you were saying there's no, it's just the wall because we don't have defenses for that. So there's literally just nothing, no in on that.
No, there's buildings and stuff. There's just no defensive structure to the south.
That seems like a very good fantasy novel element, but yeah, that makes sense that you would change that.
And also I think that changes the dynamic in an important event that I believe happens in season 4. Is that when that happens?
I don't know if it's in season 4. I'm really bad at remembering what happens in exactly which season until I rewatch it.
No.
And then let's see. So we talked about ages before. Gendry is only about 16 in the books, as opposed to being 19, 20, kind of how he's depicted in the series. And let's see. Oh, the Hound and Gregor Clegane story of the burned face origin is told to Sansa by the Hound.
Interesting.
Oh.
In the books. He tells her and then says if she ever tells anyone, he'll kill her.
Classic.
Classic Hound.
Classic Hound. He's just having fun over there.
Do you have a preference for that one, or are you okay with Peter Baelish telling it? Because it makes sense that the two little shit-nosed people know these secrets that they shouldn't share.
Totally makes sense that Peter would tell her, and I feel like it's interesting that then maybe Peter is kind of setting up somewhat of that relationship and what that's going to be later on. But I like when the Hound says it, specifically because it's a moment of vulnerability for him. Why would he tell her that? But then quickly knee-jerk back to, but if you tell anyone, I'll kill you. And I think it nicely sets up the Hound's sensitive to super murderous side, which we see both sides of very clearly throughout the series. So it's just interesting. And yeah, so that's probably it in a nutshell.
That's a lot of good ones, though.
That's a lot of meaty.
Yeah, just interesting stuff to think about. And again, I don't there are some things that I think the series changed for the better, and some things that I feel like I personally like the way that the books did it better. But especially at the time of season 1, I had read the first book before I saw the first season.
Nice.
Okay.
So I'm fully willing to admit that you stick with the first one because that's your image. But I do really like combining the facts from both to see if maybe we can anticipate where we're going in the future. I don't know. I think the burn them all clue from the series is probably our biggest clue right now into what's coming ahead.
And that's cool that you brought it up, and I'm excited for this, the bonus episode specifically, because it is cool to like learn a little bit more and see what inspired certain things. And you understand most of these decisions so far, I'm on board with like the writers of the show making them, because it makes sense of how they're building out their world.
Also interested to see, you said there's the 3 ones you dislike the most. I'm interested in finding out what the other 2 are.
Yeah.
Later down the road. But yeah, I also it's fun comparing the 2 and seeing what I don't know where it's going.
Yeah, that's a huge one for me because again, I was super on board with their love story.
Yeah.
And I really thought of it as a love story, and I think that the way that the series did it, it's not really a love story.
Yeah, and I think that because I watched the show first, for me, it's a complicated relationship, and so I always thought it's complicated. It's a complicated, because it's not just the situation, but also the era we're dealing with and how people perceive certain things. So but yeah, again, comparing the show to the books, it gives you a clearer picture of what the story is, could be, all that jazz.
Yeah, so thank you guys for letting me nerd out about this. Thank you.
Well, I'm excited for another episode. Trisha, thank you so much. DJ, thank you so much. And thank you so much to all the patrons. Make sure
you were going to be like, thank you so much to me.
To Sam. You did a lot of sitting there listening this episode. But make sure you check out the other cool features of our Patreon, because there's a lot of cool stuff you don't want to miss out on. And tune back in for another bonus episode or just the main episode of the podcast. And we'll see you guys then. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.